Good evening. I will call to order the Finance Committee meeting on May 4th, 2022 at 6 p.m. This evening is a continuation of the budget review for FY 2023, and we will start where we left off on Monday evening with the item of financial services that starts on page 18, and that would be with Director Jones. If the committee has any questions, we can get through that part of it. Good evening, Director.
Hello. Okay. It's on.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the finance to the committee if they have any questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Patrick, there's no short-term borrowing in this year's budget, so are we not, can you just explain or just let me know why?
Sure. We estimate and anticipate based on prior years, so we only have two areas in our budget where we can actually recognize any costs. And so the reason why that line is being used is because presently we're borrowing and I needed some place to show the expense. So we only have two lines in the whole budget, so that's why that's there.
And just to quickly chime in, over the past couple of years, we did, close out a lot of those accounts, short-term interest, et cetera, when we're trying to, cut the budget down. We've just left two places, one in the finance director's budget, and then there are two actual items in, I think, water and sewer that has money in there for any bond costs or borrowing costs that could come up depending on what takes place.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Any follow-up questions? Moving on to the next item then would be under other insurance on page 44. Seeing no questions, going next to retirement and pensions on page 46.
So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So I had asked the auditor why the values have changed, and she reminded me that the retirement board changed how they were allocating funds. So the questions I have, I'm all set.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is that going down to all those line items, you have questions?
For retirement and pensions, that's correct.
Okay, all right, so then we can move down to other general government on page 54. Questions on?
So, Mr. Chair, so thanks. So
Mr.
I had
President.
asked for backup information on the reserve for salaries amount.
Okay, and then going down.
Well, hang on, I have not received anything, so someone want to discuss that?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. President, okay.
I can discuss that. So right now that is funded for, we have the possibility of 12 employees that could possibly, most likely, would be retiring this fiscal year. One from City Hall, 6 from the Police Department, and 5 from the Fire Department. And then we also have some funds in there for... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I shut it off and then forgot to turn it back on. So there are 12 possible retirements happening next fiscal year. 1 for City Hall, 6 for the Police Department, 5 for the Fire Department, and then we have a small balance in there for having to do with contracts and subcontracts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, moving on to the next page is 132. I'm sorry, thank you. Yes. Other government, 132, any questions in regards to that? We'll move forward to page...
Mr. Chair?
Oh, Councilor
Sorry.
Doucette.
Just one question on page 133. The postage, I mean, everything else is pretty straightforward, but basically the fiscal year 21 actual was 0 for postage, and you're cutting the budget to 10,000. I would expect because of the pandemic, there would have been more postage. What actually happened?
I can speak to that, Counselor. We have postage in 3 areas of the budget, in water and sewer, and then, I'm sorry, I should stand up.
That's okay.
And in the finance director's budget. And what's happened over the past couple of years, kind of with the changing of positions and whatnot, the postage has been running all through the city side. It hasn't been allocated to, or reclassified to sewer and water. Also, the sewer and water department, I think they've built into their budget to cover some of the postage for the water and sewer bills that go out.
Mm-hmm.
So what I am planning on doing in this current budget, fiscal year 22, is at year end, it'll be reflected in the June statement. I'm going to reclassify some of the expenses that have been charged the city. Some of them should be allocated to water and sewer, and it just wasn't done in fiscal year 21.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Doucette. Okay, moving on to other general government, page 158. Seeing none, we'll go down to, and we'll come back to city school support when we meet with Commissioner DeVol. We'll go to retirement of debt, page 75.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if the auditor or the mayor could tell us the impact of the sale of bonds.
On the sale of bonds, I just wanted to, the amortization schedule or debt service schedule that was presented to you were borrowing at the time that the schedule was put in the book. So one of the questions that one of the points I just wanted to make is that the actual bond sale has ensued, and what we have is about a $42,394 savings from what is the actual total and the actual schedule in the book to being in the process now and getting scheduled.
Patrick, you got to hit the green button. Sorry about that.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was on. So we have a small savings of $42,394 relative to the difference between the bond schedule that was placed in the book and the fact that we're now working on the finalization of the bond schedule. So it's pretty close to what you are looking at, is the point I was trying to make. We have met with Standards & Poor's. We were able to keep our AAA bond rating, and the average rate of borrowing over the next 20 years is the true interest cost is 3.26%, which is very good.
So if I could summarize then, there's an opportunity to reduce the budget by $42,000 since it's less than the schedule.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to retirement of debt, page 117. Any questions?
Mr. Chair?
Councilor Doucette?
Thank you. Just a general question about the multipurpose bonds. What are the duration of the bonds? Do they vary, or is there a standard duration for these bonds?
The duration of the bonds do vary with their water or sewer if they're general, so I don't have all of the specific terms down at the moment, but they do vary.
Okay. Is the multipurpose bonds, are they, because the 2011 multipurpose bond looks like it's not being budgeted for. I assume it's being paid off? That's where I was going.
Sure.
Yeah, no, that's correct, it's been paid off.
Okay, okay. Are the other multipurpose bonds over also 10 years, or you can follow back with me later if you want to about those? Sure. I think someone wants to speak.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the bonds and some of the interest line items go, we use our best estimate. I remember we used to have this discussion with Councilor Delano way back then when we were using a rate of 3%, and we should be doing better than that. We're only going to fund 2.5% across the board, but we don't, you know, some of the bonds we haven't gone out yet. We went out quickly on this one because in discussions with my team, it was kind of decided rates are going up, let's lock in the library right now. And we got a great rate of 3.26% for 20 years for the library. So it's all funded at this point, but we got that out the other day. So we were going to wait a year and ban it and then bond it next year, but we decided to go right away before rates went up. We have the feds going up this week, and then again probably in a month or two. So we think we made the right choice. I guess a year from now we'll know. But some of that, keep in mind, are on our schedule, and others are in anticipation of when and if anything is approved. Because sometimes we have to go out, like the one for the library, we're going to have to go out and ban. And rather than do that, we just went out in the market. So some of the answers are going to be a little wishy-washy, only because some of them aren't fixed in place already.
Okay, that's understandable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, moving on to retirement of debt, page 134. No questions on that. We'll move down to 160. No questions on that. Long-term debt on page 77.
Oh, actually,
Oh,
Mr.
Councilor
Chair, just a clarification, the MWRA pipeline, I know it's 700,000. What was that pipeline for?
Those, I don't know if you recall, but I think 5 years ago, there was a lead service pipe.
That's what it is.
And Commissioner Duval can correct me, but that's what that is for.
Okay.
It was a 5-year program to
Yes.
replace lead service.
Okay, that's fine. I wanted to know which one it was, so thank you, sir.
Just to
Thank you,
follow
ma'am.
up on that, we were planning on borrowing $1 million a year from MWRA. It's zero interest, so we get into that program right away, figuring it was about $5 million to do the lead services. This is the final year, so we're going to finish up all the lead services in the city, and they'll be completed this year, and we won't have lead issues anymore in the city of Marlborough. So we took that on, and
I remember that coming on, and, you know, our pipes will be corrected, but if there's any lead pipes in the buildings themselves, it's up to the homeowner
that's correct.
to take care of it, so just,
Bringing it up to the building.
yes, okay, thanks.
Okay, moving on to page 77. Long-term debt interest for schools. Questions there? Long-term debt interest, page 119. No questions there? Moving on to...
Actually, Mr. Chair,
Councilor Doucette?
just the 2022, the multipurpose interest, is that effectively a BAM, or is that just interest alone, or is there any principal?
I'm looking in the,
That,
want to make sure I'm following that correct.
yeah,
Making
that's
sure
just that's just the interest portion for that.
It's not the principal.
No, the principal was on a separate page that we
Yeah.
already looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilor Doucette. Okay, moving on to page 136. Long-term debt and interest, no questions there. Page 162, long-term and interest debts. No questions there. Moving on to debt interest for schools, page 79. No questions there. Moving on to short-term debt interest on page 121. Seeing none, short-term debt interest, page 138. Seeing none there, short-term interest, page 164.
So I see a trend here where there is no short-term interest. Is that just based because the interest rates are what they are?
There is no short-term interest at this time in the budget. Typically, that would be funded when we were anticipating having to go out and do short-term borrowing, but we don't expect to do that, so it's at zero. I did not want to take it out of the budget completely. I wanted to leave it there because there's a good chance that in the near future, it could come back in.
Okay.
If we determine.
So we haven't done any of this in 21 as well as 22 going into 23?
Yes.
But it's still on the radar screen effectively?
Yes, I just didn't want to completely take it out so that if it got reintroduced, it would be,
Something
what is
different.
that, you
Yes.
know? So,
Yeah,
These-
okay.
To her point, they're basically place card holders in the budget packet so that they don't get forgotten.
Yep, okay. Thank you for the clarification.
All right, so moving on to tax title on page 26. Seeing none, moving on to capital outlay, page 123.
Mr. President, Mr. Chair.
President Rossi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's $300,000 for City Hall equipment. I was wondering if someone could tell us what that involves.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we've been using this for things that have come up during the year that are capital items that weren't funded in the budget, equipment that's broken down that we had to go out and buy, and rather than come down for another request. So we've been doing it for a number of years. This past year, what we did was we had the fence across the street at the on Main Street, so the contractor called us and said, I'm taking down my fence because she's not paying me. So we had to spend $30,000, $31,000 to erect the fence there to keep this area safe. So the process for coming down here and asking for the money would have been a little more time-consuming than just taking it out of that line item. So that's and that will be reimbursed eventually. Toward the end of the year, the chief was talking about his cruises that are usually in the budget. You won't find any cruises in there this year because we actually took 3. The reason we moved on them at that time in March was they had 3 on site that we could have picked up, so I told them to go ahead and use the City Hall capital money for that, and that was $43,000 for 3 police vehicles. Also took out $2,000 to do 2 of the electric block murals. So that's where the money for the City Hall went this year. Last year, there was one of the big DPW vehicles went down just before winter, and we ended up buying a new one for $226,000. What was the other thing? The fee associated with the bonds we went out for last year was $2,000. There was no funds in there for in the current budget, and rather than reclass stuff, we took the money out of here. We bought, there was 2 other pieces of equipment for the DPW also that were purchased last year. So it's been for things that either weren't planned on, and some of it was for an expedited process. So those are the types of things. That's the entire list for the last 2 years.
Thank you. This is a great candidate for ARPA funding and not putting on the tax base. So I would, hopefully we'll get down to adjusting the budget, that this would be an item that we could eliminate and use ARPA funds for. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Doucette.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the cases of buying fire equipment or something like that, there wouldn't be a transfer for that because it's coming directly out of that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilor.
And are we talking about line item 58595, labeled City Hall equipment? Well,
I think
sounds
it's
like it
City Hall
wasn't.
capital, Kitty Hall capital?
It's called capital projects.
City Hall equipment.
Yeah, City Hall
Sorry,
equipment on
City
the
Hall.
outline on the next page there, page 124.
Yes.
Yes.
So it really isn't really City Hall equipment per se, it's equipment for the city.
That's correct.
Okay, because I think it could be labeled better. And in the past year, you didn't have any funding in there. FY '21, you had 300,000. FY '22 shows no funding.
Again, last year, we were trying to get down to a 0 budget. So there was some carryover money that we utilized for a couple of these things. But again, I was trying to skimp as much as I could in last year's
So,
budget.
if I may, the information you just gave on the purchases
Yep.
was from another fund, not from this the City Hall
There's
equipment.
nothing in that, there's no
Correct.
request for the current money in the 2023 budget.
Well, for FY '23, though, there is
What's that?
300,000. It shows FY '23,
Yeah, no, the
300.
request for funding is there, but there are no commitments for that money.
understandable. I was getting confused when you were saying I had to fix a fence, bought some cruises and all that. I said, where'd that come from? But that was from reserves you had from the
Yeah.
year prior? Okay, now I'm
So
starting to
the-
understand.
If this were to be eliminated from the budget, there'd be more requests during the year that we would ask for suspensions for to expedite some processes for some additional equipment.
So the labeling is a little bit off, because it's really, the labeling is a little bit off, because it's
Yeah.
not City Hall equipment,
No.
it's city equipment.
It's city,
Okay.
it's city capital purchases. How's that?
So-
That's probably a better
Maybe.
title for it.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. All right, moving on to workers' compensation on page 48. It's 0 in the budget. Moving on to...
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
I had a question about workers' comp.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilor.
I'm just trying to get clarification on this. Why is it that it's did this money get reallocated? Because you would expect workers' comp to continue going forward. So why, and it's relevant for the 22 and the 23.
So I will answer that question. I don't know if you had a chance to look under my supplemental information.
I might have, and I may not have memorized it, so please remind me.
So just a little history. So the city has a trust fund for workers' comp. So typically, annually, in the budget process, we would appropriate money that then gets moved into the trust fund, and that's where we pay all the bills. We have built up a surplus in the trust, the workers' comp. So if you look, and you can look back at, well, I'll flip to it if I can get to it quick enough. We have an adequate surplus in there, and in addition to that, workers' comp claims have been down significantly over the past couple of years. So we're chipping away at the reserve that we have. There's no need to appropriate additional monies into the trust at this point.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Council Perman.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, what is the reserve amount total? Like, where could we find that information?
Just one second, just bear with me a moment. So in the supplemental, under auditor, there's an actual, there's a tab that says workers' comp, and then you'll see my lovely spreadsheet that is in here. I'm projecting at the end of this fiscal year, we're going to have a reserve of $1.6 million. It's towards the end of, okay. So I estimate that we'll have a reserve of $1.6 million. And then that will get carried forward to next year, and I'm projecting that we'll have expenditures of $620, which is a little on the high side. So if that's the case, we'll end next fiscal year with $900,000 in reserve still. So we're in a healthy spot. I don't feel that we need to appropriate any more money into the trust.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilman. Okay, moving on through that, we can look at unemployment compensation, page 50. Moving on to the health insurance on page 52. Councilor Doucette.
Yeah, I just want to say congratulations on keeping this level funded. So it's really hard to do with the market the way it is, so good job with that.
Good point, Councilor.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to health life insurance, page 130. None. Moving on to health life insurance, page 156. Seeing none? All right, so we've finished with that part of it. We'll go back up to, facilities, public facilities, and unless any other further questions for Director? Okay, we'll go to facilities. Thank you, Director Jones.
How you doing today?
Yes, public facilities, page 41. Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening, excuse me. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the council. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. My time is yours, so I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Council Earl.
Yes, on page 42, electricity, I think we all know a little bit about what happened through COVID, so.
Yes.
So that's a 30% increase. And I think President Ossing also has looked at that and suggesting implementing energy conservation measures, and I'll let him speak for himself on that question, but I'm just curious, what is happening in respect to energy conservation programs?
So we've done quite a bit over the years.
I mean, recently,
Recently?
kind of, you got the solar panels up.
Right,
Or-
and that's
or
probably
protected.
the more recent development is putting solar panels on the school roofs. And we don't have a lot of data to know how much we're saving there because we're literally just turned them on in the fall. Kane School we turn on in the summer, so we have a little bit of information there, but the rest of them have turned on just in the fall or winter months when the sun angle is not as strong as it could be. And we're getting ready to turn Goodnow School on now, so hopefully when those come online, we get some better information. We'll see what kind of savings we have there.
Okay, so there is some expected savings in the future year from solar power.
Yes, we hope so,
To
for
help
sure.
to balance off the increase due to heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And I know the superintendent had mentioned that they're proposing some new systems in two of the schools, I believe, Kane and Jarrick, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully, those will be energy efficient, as they should be energy efficient, I would expect.
Right, we're working on HVAC improvements to those two schools.
Hopefully, they'll save some funding cost as well.
Right.
Thank you. And I see the mayor walked over
Thank you,
here.
Councilor. I mean, that is a good point, but thank you. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of, obviously, the commissioner's already heard my frustration, and I actually had President Ossing come into the meeting we were at when the commissioner brought me the news, and I wanted to know why and how do we fix this. So we heard it at the same time, but immediately after that, I put the commissioner and his team and Priscilla and superintendent in a room and said, this isn't going to work, so we're going out to hire a power consumption consultant to tell us how we can do better. I was shocked to see the numbers with the 4 new solar panel arrays on 4 schools. I would have expected to see a huge drop here. The city's actually paying less for their power than the residents are, and municipal aggregation has given us a great rate. The one we have in the city is a little bit better. The biggest issue, we had one issue with some of the bills that there was some disputes on down at the facilities department, and I wasn't aware of that until it was brought to my attention a few weeks ago. But the other thing was, we started obviously changing the way we have our circulators and everything working through the school systems, where they're going 24/7. So they're using a ton more power, and that's become a real issue. So I put a halt on all the improvements that they're looking to make to the HVAC system until we get someone in here that can tell me at the end of this what it's going to cost. Because if they're left on 24/7, 12 months a year, because of condensation or whatever the issue is, it's just not going to be affordable. So, when you have your house, and you can have the most conservative house in the world, but once you decide to put lights around your swimming pool, and you put lights in the backyard and the patio, and you put spotlights in the front yard and the driveway, no matter how conservative you are, you're going to see an increase in usage, which means you're going to see an increase in bills. So this is a number that I'm pretty aggravated about. And like I said, they've identified someone that they want to bring in as a consultant. We're going through that process now, but it was a very frustrating couple of days, let me tell you. So, not excuses or anything else, but I found out about whenever Council Austin came to my office, I found out at the same time, and it was only 6 weeks ago or something.
And Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Mr.
And the scenario about shutting off, having the lights around the pool is also you need to shut those lights off, and hopefully the power consultant will look at even our fields. Many a time I'll drive by one of our fields and the lights are on and no one's there. And those are pretty good-sized lights that light up the high school field. So hopefully they will be paying attention to useless lighting of not just the schools and so forth. Now, I'm not an expert when it comes to ventilation, but that, hopefully the power consultant can determine if those can be intermittent. I'm not an expert on that, but I think the suggestion the mayor made about a power consultant, definitely I would support. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Council Perlman.
Thank you. I just had two quick questions. One, the number that we see, I guess, line item 52120 with the estimated for FY '23, is that not taking into account these unmonitored increases in efficiency that we would get from solar panels? Is this an estimation based on not having the data yet, or hoping that we're going to see a decrease and then this number is reflecting a decrease?
So what I show on that line, and also similarly on the maintenance school side of the budget, is my best estimation of what it would cost the city for electricity usage, given the state that we're in right now. So if we make no improvements to the run times of the HVAC systems across city buildings, if the solar panels that are coming online at the schools, if they don't provide any savings, this is the number that I would expect for us to see. So hopefully we can do better than this.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I hope it, this improvement can move forward, because this does seem like a very high energy consumption, especially given all of the LED lights and all the other improvements that have been made in this city. And then in terms of the consultant, is that something that's already been within the budget that would be paid for through your department or through the city, or is that something that would be a transfer that would come down?
We're going to pay that through our current budget right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank
I'm
you.
going to go to Council Doucette and then I'll go to Council Webb. Council
Thank
Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So the electricity, I understand, is a hot item, no pun intended with that, but the blowers that are in the systems, the HVAC systems we have now, are the older blowers, right? And those are as old as, the original systems, I assume, so, and they weren't necessarily designed to run 24/7 either. So different design factors require a different set of blowers, so, my first reaction to this is, yes, it's most likely blowers, because we had this conversation before, and B, they probably need to be replaced. But getting an analyst in here makes a lot of sense to look at more holistically. We also did a transfer a couple of weeks ago to cover the current electric bill because of the jump in price, right? Remember that?
That's in committee right now.
That's in
That
committee.
is committee.
Okay, that's in committee, but.
Yes, sir.
So that's reacting to this, and this budget is taking that to the next fiscal year to make sure it cleans up. That's why the jump is in.
In their anticipation, but
Yes.
the item that's in committee is funding that number.
The current one.
From different department sources.
Right.
But that is in committee.
Yes, okay, so this is a two-part story, really,
Absolutely.
So that's something that, we need to be aware of, and I appreciate you taking the measures to address this, because I think that's critical, because as we hit this, you got to figure out basically what are the best steps going forward. Couple of other questions I have, though. The street lighting, which is the next one down, for fiscal year 21, the bill was $525. Now, we just went through a whole LED retrofit process for the street lights. So if the price of street lighting is $525 in 21, why are you budgeting $10,000 going forward? Is that in fact way too much?
So that budget line item we use for, and we think of street lighting, we think of, the big lights at the top of utility poles.
Right.
What we use this line item for is the decorative lighting we have out here in front of City Hall.
Okay.
So the banners you see, we use that line item for the banners. If one of these decorative poles, say there's a accident, there's a hit and run, we can't go after the person who knocked it down.
Oh, so we own the
Insurance
poles on Main
company.
Street?
So we'll have to replace those, we'll use this line item to replace those poles.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification for that. Third point, and I'll be done with this, but it's all on the same page. Heating oil is $4,000. Which buildings still use heating oil?
So these are typically pump stations, generators we have around the periphery of the city that are not on natural gas.
Okay.
So picture a sewer pumping station,
Yeah.
living by the side of the road that doesn't have gas in the street. We gotta have a standby generator to power that pumping station, and so the standby generator, uses heating oil, uses
Okay.
diesel fuel essentially.
Right, well, the difference, okay, so the difference between heating oil and diesel is effectively red dye, right?
Right.
So, it's allowed for us to use heating oil in a generator?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the line item we use. We're gonna buy the appropriate fuel, but that's the line item we're gonna use
Okay.
because it's so similar.
Okay. Similar chemically, legally, night and day. So I think if we're purchasing diesel, I think it needs to be changed to diesel as a label, okay? Versus heating oil, which is characteristically different, because if you start using heating oil in your car, it's gonna fail inspection.
And so I will say primarily there are pumping stations that they use this line item when you
Okay.
purchase fuel for those pumping stations. I believe there may be a building or two that we purchase heating oil from that also is captured in this line item.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Now,
either you change it to diesel fuel and then we're out of whack with the heating oil that we buy for a building,
Right.
or you keep it as is and then
Well,
we're
the-
out of whack for the,
The diesel is priced differently because the diesel's taxed and the heating oil's not. So, it may be that we need to go for two separate line items or something like that. Because I see that as financially a different purchase. So, but, we can argue that till the cows come home.
Council Wagner.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, make sure I understood that correctly. So on the electricity line, what I'm hearing, it's not, because I know the city's done put a number of efficiency measures in place, so it's not so much it's not being driven by like lights being left on at a field or what kind of light bulbs we're using in buildings. From what I'm hearing you say is the driving factor was the HVAC system because of COVID and now having to run that purification, those systems 24/7, and that's what spiked it?
well, that's a big part of it, Counselor. The other part is as we're doing our research, uncovered the fact that National Grid had a billing error with us.
Okay.
And so for part of FY '21 and part of FY '22, National Grid didn't bill us for streetlights. And so that amount was left to accumulate without our knowledge because we didn't see it.
Okay.
And there's a long, reason why it was the way it was. But once we discovered that, then we figured out it was a big bill, and then we've got to come up with the money to pay that big bill. It's money we would have spent had they billed us properly, so there's nothing untoward there. It's just that we're playing catch-up now, and then we need to budget for it going forward. So that's why, that's part of the reason that you see the increase here.
So the consultant, because that's a big job, so the consultant will be focusing on energy systems in the schools, or is the consultant going to look at citywide measures that could be taken?
So we're starting that consultant off at the high school,
Okay.
because the high school is the biggest user. And so we're going to start going through that system, and also the systems there are the oldest as well compared to the other systems aside from Kane and York. So that's where we can get the best bang for the buck, and so we're going to start there.
Thank you.
If I can just follow up on that, we're looking at the projects that we have going right now in the schools, because a lot of that's being funded through the, what the hell does the schools call it? It's opera money for the schools. It's got a different name, but, so they have the money sitting there to do a lot of these improvements. They're ready to go as soon as school's out, but I put a hold on everything. So the consultant will start there,
Okay.
and so we can try to get those completed as much as possible before school starts.
Thank you.
Council Perman.
Thank you. Moving to page 43, I had questions regarding repairs and maintenance municipal buildings. I was hoping that this line item is more of a you know, preventative funding pool, so if something does happen, or is this something where there's expected repairs that are going to happen within the next fiscal year that are going to be drawing from this line item because there is an increase?
Yeah, it's both, actually. It's for problems that we see that we need to fix. It's also to react to problems that pop up. And this is for every system you might see in a building, including the building itself. So you're talking plumbing, heating, electrical systems, building envelope, doors, windows, any sort of problem that you might encounter in a building is captured under this line item for preventative maintenance and also for repair.
Okay, and so what would be an example of something you anticipated this coming year to spend out of this funding pool?
We have a expensive, high-capacity water heater breakdown at one of the treatment plants to the tune of, $10,000 just for the unit. Then you add another $10,000 in labor, and there's a $20,000 bill for one water heater.
Okay, now that's helpful just to clarify. And then I guess to item number 53999, other services, just kind of getting a better feel for if this is a catch-all category or if there's particular items that do fall under other services.
So we use that line item for reimbursements, and I'll give you an example. The motor that runs the clock tower in this building, because the clock is old, the motor is old, and there's only one type of motor that can fit into the clock and do what it needs to do. And I won't bore you with the details, but they're very hard to find, and we're able to find a motor in California. We didn't have time to try to set them up as a vendor. It's going to be a one-time thing anyway. So a member of my staff buys the motor and then puts in for reimbursement for that motor. So that's where we use this line. It's also for routine service contracts. One is the security company we use across the city. All of the charges for the installs, repair, for all the security systems will come out of this line item as well.
Okay, and so is the increase because there's an anticipated upcoming additional reimbursements that you see happening, given the funding that was more close before?
The increase is more driven by inflation pressures that we're seeing. It's so hard to get some of these parts, and when we find them, unfortunately, there's a premium we have to pay to get them. So that's the big driver there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, Councilor Roby.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to the electricity did you say that the bills that you received for the 3 months that you didn't know about were for street lighting? Or
Yeah.
did I hear you wrong?
For the street lights that we have around.
So the street lights are going, then going forward, you have added an additional $460,000 to the city and $540,000 to the schools. Those street lights are going to cost us that much more?
So the issue, and the mayor touched on this, is kind of a three-prong issue that we uncovered as we went through this. The one issue, and the big one, is the electricity usage, in which can be tied directly to our run times on our HVAC equipment across the city, mainly the schools and then mainly the high school on top of that. Systems that were designed to run for 4 hours a day, we started running 6 hours a day, and then we started running 24 hours a day. So we can get the number of air exchanges we needed to get the air quality we needed to have the children get back to school. And so that's where that came from. The other part on the national grid billing error, was discovered, and so that contributed to that. And then the third part of the equation here is the look back that we saw for previous budget approvals for electricity, and how that had actually been decreased over the years. Some of these budget line items, the two electricity line items between property and building maintenance and maintenance schools, if you put that together, if you look back over the last 2 or 3 years, you'll find what I call a structural imbalance of about $230,000. And for some reason that I'm not aware of, what we had, in the, say, FY 18, 19 days, by the time you got to FY 20 and 21, had been cut by a couple $100,000, sum total between the two electricity line items. So you put the $230,000 on the structural imbalance, you put the National Grid billing error of about $350,000, and then the increased runtime for the HVAC equipment and the related increase in electricity consumption. You put that together, and that's where I get the $1 million, and that's where I split that up between property and building maintenance and maintenance schools.
Okay, so I guess I will just reiterate the comments that have been made before by Councilor Ossing, that if those bills had been in the budget, we would have found a way to pay them. And we've cut the budgets in the past to do some savings, and we've always met the costs going forward by transfers within a budget. Thank you.
That's correct, Councilor.
That's correct.
A couple of years we did that on that electricity line. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So following up, Councilor Doucette, just to put you at ease or not at ease, on street lighting, in fiscal year 21, we didn't spend a dime. And so far this year, we've spent a total of $545. Okay?
Is that this year, or is that,
This year.
okay.
I'm just looking at the April,
Transfer.
the budget
Transfer?
report.
Well, the budget.
In fiscal year 21, for heating oil, we only spent $5,000. So, to Councilor Roby's point, the mayor and his team do an awesome job putting a budget together. But you're gonna see when I get to the end of this, there's opportunities to adjust the budget. It's not gonna impact services, it's not gonna impact employees. Our job is what we got to turn around is what we want the taxpayers to ultimately fund. There's money in the budget, and you're seeing that with all the money that moves around. So I hope you're not worried about making any adjustments to the budget, because the world is still going to turn. The mayor and his team have done an outstanding job, and any adjustments this council makes, I'm sure, will be minuscule compared to a $181 million budget. Continuing on, public facility director position. My understanding that position is vacant, so why is there a salary increase?
The salary increase is for the cost of living increase that we anticipate.
But for a vacant position, they'd be starting at step 1 or 2, depending on what. So I guess, is the position actually vacant?
The position is vacant, yes.
Okay, so then why would we be seeing an increase in the salary for the position?
If I might, Mr. Chairman, it's, first of all, we'll take a good public facilities director tomorrow. We've been posting the job, we've been through a few interviews. Obviously, it's an extremely important position in the city, so we want to make sure we have the right person to do that. As far as the increase in the budget, the salary ordinances increase whether there's someone in the job or not. So when we go out to find someone, it's going to be a couple $1,000s higher, and hopefully we find someone sooner rather than later, but I think we've been out 3 times?
4 times.
4 times at this point, and we're going to try it again, but that's a position that obviously the construction industry is doing really well, and they're paid a lot more out there than they are in here. If we're fortunate and Washington wins and interest rates go up and the economy goes to the tank, then we'll be able to get someone a lot easier. So, but right now, that's the only reason that went up, Counselor, is to keep the salary ordinance in place as has been approved.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I agree, it's been tough to fill, but again, here I want to remind the councilors, this is a position now for 2 years that we've just taken and moved funds to do other things with. There's no body in the position. So I get back to Councilor Roby's point. There is money in the budget to make adjustments, and the world will still, and the city will do just fine. Last question, Mr. Commissioner. For municipal aggregation, we know what the rate is. We know how long the contract is, we know who the supplier is. So who is the supplier for the city's municipal aggregation on the city side?
The city supplier is Constellation New Energy. And the rate under contract that the city has with Constellation New Energy is .0865 per kilowatt hour.
And I would mention to councils that is an extremely attractive rate. That's good. And how long is our contract with Constellation, or is that just a going?
That contract is in place until December of 2023. Obviously, ahead of that expiration date, the city would go out for bid.
Yep. No, thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good points. All right, moving on to city school support on page 68, 71, and 73. Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We just went through the whole thing about the electricity increase, so I'm not going to go into that, but natural gas increase, is that consumption increasing or is that price increasing?
So that increase is because we haven't had an increase in that line item in a while, and we've also added a brand-new elementary school.
Okay,
So that's where that increase comes from.
okay. That's fine, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Doucette. Any further questions for the commissioner? Nope, seeing none. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to reiterate to the committee, we all come in here with a number and an idea what the budget should be, and listening to some input, very critical input and constructive. I'm roughly seeing that we do have wiggle room to reduce the budget by about $755,000. So there is room to make adjustments. I know Councilor Roby has mentioned about the electric, Councilor Orem has mentioned it, President Ossing has mentioned all of these things, but I'll leave that up to the committee, but that's what I've heard. Councilor Orem.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and just so you know, I'm on a time schedule, and I do apologize, I have a complicated schedule tonight. I was looking over what President Ossing submitted, and to some degree, he had 7,800. What was the difference? Were you looking at some of his numbers when you came up with the 755?
It was on from the first evening, when we had Chief Georgie here, as well as Chief Breen. I am not in support of any line item reducing on those two items. My concern is for going into, what was it, 50,000 for the court appearances. I'm thinking that I know Chief Georgie mentioned that could change. Now, hopefully, we're coming out of COVID and everything, so that's why I just didn't support those two items. So that's probably the difference.
That's fine. And if I may, that makes reasonable sense. I think what we need to do next year is pay close attention to an up-to-date financial report on how much was spent up to April, or through April, so we can know that. I know it's difficult. I don't want to put a lot of pressure on people to get that report to us. That way we can put that side by side.
And City Auditor Smith that's recently sent out a report as well that we get on a regular basis as well.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not in any way saying that's not being done, but
No, absolutely.
you know as well as I in municipal government, and many of us have been in municipal government, typically departments don't want to spend that money until the end of the year in case they don't have enough money to get through the year, each department by department. So I can respect that to some degree, why some of the lines have been questioned and why haven't they spent the full budget on, or at least at this point, 75%. But I understand how municipal government works. A lot of times they wait because they may not have that funding that they were hoping to have. They wish, because they may need to transfer it due to electricity or whatever. But even though I will support the 700, Was it exactly, Mr. Chair, 755,000?
My figures, and I'll leave it up to the rest of the committee, my figures is $755,500.
$500, okay. And I would agree with you, and I thank you and Mr. President for putting it together. Where we find the funds, especially the ARPA, I'd like, because that's called the, not City Hall equipment, but City Capital Improvement. That last line item that says 300,000,
Which wasn't,
which I'm not going to commit to any of that until, you know, suggest the reduction, but I'd like to see what the request for capital equipment is before we consider which fund we find it from. Maybe ARPA might not be appropriate, maybe ARPA may be appropriate, but I don't want to commit myself to that at this point. So that's my comments for now.
any committee, Council Rowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not on Finance Committee, but it's my understanding that the city budget is not like the schools, and you don't just cut a number, you cut specific lines.
Absolutely.
Or specific, we're not going line by line by line like we used to, but are you saying you're agreeing with all of the items that are delineated by Councilor Ossing's memo? Which should then be gone over so that we're all clear
Yes,
on what
and
reductions
I was going to leave that up to the committee, and we can go line by line if the committee agrees. Absolutely. Council Perman.
Thank you. And I remember at the meeting on Monday, there was discussion with the assessor's office of having the individual come back to discuss some of the updates after discussion. Are we going to give anyone an opportunity to discuss that more in depth before cutting? I just wanted to give more of a discussion. I thought I saw him here, but maybe he left.
Yeah, it wasn't on the position itself. I would support a reduction, in the professional tech services if they are going to be using have more employees in that department. I would support a reduction in the professional technical services part of it. So that would be only reducing the professional tech service line item.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
President.
I think what Councilor Cronin was asking for is the committee can table, I guess, the assessor's office. I think she wants another opportunity to ask the assessor, Mr. John, what comments Councilor has.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seemed like we left Monday's discussion, offering him an opportunity to review our comments and come back with more of a, I guess, feedback on what we suggested, especially given kind of his hierarchy review of the positions. And so I thought I saw him here earlier, but I don't see him anymore. So I don't know if that is now a moot point, but figured it would just be important for the committee to know that that came up on Monday's meeting.
Good point. I mean, if the...
Again, Mr. Chair, so
President Oscar.
if he's not here, if he comes back, I'm sure the committee would love to have him speak. My recommendation, if the Finance Committee is amenable to it, my list of potential adjustments to the budget, just take them up one at a time. If there's a second and a vote,
Absolutely.
up or down, it makes it real easy. And if anyone wants clarification, I'm happy to provide additional detail that may not be clear in my short comments on the spreadsheet that I provided.
Do you want to share any of your short comments? Or, because I may differ on some of them, but...
No, I'll let you, Mr. Chair, just start. You can start at the top if the council wants, so you get a first and a second to discuss them, and then I'm happy to discuss the items, and if they don't want to do them, they won't vote on them.
Councilor Brown.
Thank you. I just have a quick question for clarification. I just wanted to make sure I understand. I have President Ossing's spreadsheet in front of me, but you were mentioning a number or figure that was closer to 750. Is that removing the line items for police and fire that's
Yes.
on the, okay, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
So for the committee, we can take up the individual line item. One of the first ones was from the assessor's office, and it was on page 22, if you want to look at that. It was on page 22, and it's item 53180, under professional tech services. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just ask you for consideration. I know in the past, when there's been reductions in the budget, actually, the President Ossinger and I had discussions about it, and it makes it easier for the department heads, the council, and everyone else if you would simply find the number you're comfortable with, if we're going to have reductions, and ask you to cut one line item, and we can kind of throw a line item out that we can backfill from other areas, because the line item, if you're doing the individual line items, half of the ones you're looking to reduce, I will be back here for. That I can assure you. But if we do one big line item, if you did health insurance, just cut a number, you know, say you're going to cut $1,000, maybe even $2,000, maybe you can go up to $5,000, but whatever the number is, cut it out of health insurance, and then as the year goes on and we have to backfill, we can grab from different areas to backfill health insurance, and that will be a transfer that the council will have to make. But we'll only have to be down here for one larger transfer, because some of these, depending, as far as the assessor's office, depending on when we get a senior assessor in, will determine how much of the you know, outside services that I need for the outside consultant. The electricity, I'm not confident that I won't be back here for electricity money. Other governmental services, the $200,000, that's completely dependent on how many of those people retire. If they all retire and we settle the contract that's still outstanding, then I'll be back here. If not, then there will be money left in that line item. As far as the court overtime, we're going to see a transfer for that this year, because courts have been closed for 2 years. That's why we haven't spent the money, but we will be spending it this year. The fire overtime, again, everyone knows I'm going to be back down here for fire overtime. And then the city hall equipment, I'll just have to change the capital request to include some of the things that maybe are gray areas that I kind of drag out during the year, but have that as like sitting there that we can always do if something breaks down. So I would just ask for your consideration when a number is decided on, that you pull it. I would recommend the health insurance line item, but that's obviously it's your budget at this point.
I'll yield to Council Roby.
Councilor Roby.
Thank you. While I appreciate the input from the mayor, to me, doing it that way removes the ability for us to keep track of what our reductions actually do. So if we reduce a specific line item and he has to ask for a transfer next year, we can keep track of that and know, okay, now for the following year's budget, maybe we don't reduce that line item. I want to know what the impact of the specific reductions are, not just take this money and stick it in some line and say, okay, let's cut that line. So for me, no, it's not my idea of what we're supposed to be doing.
President Ossie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the mayor's correct. We can do it that way. Council Roby is also correct. If you count the individual line items, you now know what you're setting the bar at for next year. If you just take it out of health insurance, we know, you know, health insurance is going to be something different next year, but we won't know what our intentions were. So either one method will work. However, I'll remind you, what you didn't hear is, and I compliment the mayor for that, the city will do just fine if we make any adjustments to the budget, right? And so I want to draw your attention to the second page of the spreadsheet that I have. So if, assuming it's 857, or if it's whatever the finance committee, 700,000, you know, it's going to be an increase around 3%, a little over 3%, but it'll reduce the average taxes from 262 to about 227. And I agree with the mayor 100%. Those numbers are going to change, but your job right now is to work on the information that we have, and that's what we think the budget's going to be. So if we make those adjustments, we can walk out of here saying, okay, we think that the average house is going to be closer to 227 versus 262. And then I just want to remind you, so through the reports the auditor provides us, through April, We're $1.1 million under in salary line items. Under, right? That's positions that aren't filled, money that's not spent, that can be moved to handle way more than the adjustments we've had. The police department is currently under their salary right now of $270,000. The fire department's under $201,000 salary, and we know they'll move some of that to overtime. But it more than compensates for it. It's not, again, any adjustments is not going to cripple the operations of the fire or police department. Mid-year transfers, the ones that the mayor talks about, that they can move money within salary and within the expense line items. Over $880,000 have moved. Now, if you told us a year ago we were going to cut $880,000 from some of those line items, there'd be the same concern. Oh, we can't do that. No, the world's okay. Money gets moved around, and the system works just fine. I mean, it's set up, I think, very efficiently for the mayor and the department heads to do their job. So just going to fiscal year 21, we finished fiscal year 21 with $6.5 million available, all right? So what does that mean when money's available at the end of the year? It rolls into free cash, all right? But our tax rate is set on what the budget is that we do in November. So, I mean, it's good. I mean, I'm the biggest fan of having big free cash, but again, you know, we have an opportunity here to trim some of that, and I hope the Finance Committee looks favorably, and as the Finance Committee knows, it's got to come out of finance one way or the other, either with some adjustments or not, and then the council gets the same swing at it, and they can make adjustments or not, and the budget ultimately just takes. Okay, quiz question, how many votes to approve the budget? Six. Correct, right? 6 votes to approve the budget. So, I mean, Mr. Chair, you can do whatever you think is appropriate. The list I have, if you want to just go through each one by one, or if you want to take them all as one lump sum, as the mayor suggested, out of health insurance, and then he can play with it. The advantage there is it's easy. The hard part is, as Council Roby said, it's tough to know what we actually wanted to adjust the budget by.
Council Proman.
Thank you. Just kind of hearing everyone's comments, I will say I appreciate what Councilor Roby brought up. I think it's really helpful for us to be able to track where the money is coming from, especially from year to year. And I think those transfers continuing to justify, you know, why was the line item cut? Maybe that shouldn't have been the decision. This is what's going forward from this, you know, particular line item to another one. So I would be in support of going each line and doing that reduction. I think that's also more clear to the public and make sure that we're all on the same page. And so if we're going to go line by line too, it might be helpful to discuss also if it's in the same department, since some of them are interrelated.
Okay. And Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the old President Ossing used to say, congratulations, you're doing a great job in managing this budget. But now it's an issue that I have extra money. And actually, he said that, I can't believe, that's great. You get in at just over 4% in a year that we started with a 0 in the prior year. So I don't know, I guess there's other things flying around. But as far as the budget goes, you get a report every month. Councilor Roby, you got a report today. So look at the report, and that shows what we spend in the different line items. Every line item is in that report. Every revenue line item is in that report. And I just want to remind you that we've done such a lousy job on this. In the last 10 years, we have the second highest excess levy capacity in the entire state. We got $15 million in free cash, and for the first time in the city's history, we have another AAA bond rating. So you can micromanage all you want. Cut whatever you want. I've told you before. But don't start telling me how to run the city. Once it's done with you, I'll run things.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Wagner.
Just a clarification question. So, I mean, what I'm hearing makes sense as far as simplicity to cut, like the one number. So in the case of the assessor's budget, right? So say if we were to buy a line, say, oh, we want to cut technical services, say we wanted to zero it out. But that professional that we hired we've driven by Department of Revenue rules, right? So they may have to hire an if I'm understanding this, they may have, I mean, they're may have to hire technical services, and then I get the whole transfer thing somewhere else, but it feels like a exercise in just a lot of extra work to say we want to cut that line, when the person who's in charge of this is going to have to manage, they make those decisions, and the money will get moved around. So and then I'm hearing, like, right, if I want to know exactly where it's being spent in the city, I look at the reports that we get, the assessor reports. So I would, am I not, it feels like we're complicating something that doesn't have to be. Can you?
Well, one thing on the professional tech service, that's anticipating, that's also looking for future uses. So they're putting that in the budget. That's why looking at that might be something to cut, because they may not utilize those funds throughout the year.
But just a follow-up clarification, but they could, even if we zeroed it out, say right now, if the requirement was there, that it could still happen, because the money would be transferred from something, right?
If I can make a point, since I had done it, if we zero it out and they need the money, there would be a transfer, and we could show, the transfer would then show us, yes, they really did need that money. If we leave the money there and take it out of health insurance, and then they start transferring it out of there, or they don't, and nothing is spent, then I guess we know that it was in there extra, but it just, can I get a clarification? Because I thought when we agreed to the new way of doing the budget, we don't cut individual lines. We cut either salaries or we cut other. Is that not true any longer? Didn't we agree to do that again this year?
Yeah, that, I'll let Diane answer.
I'll just, the council has agreed to approve the budget for each department by salary and by a total salary amount and total expense amount. And by doing that, that gives the department heads the ability to move money within the salary but the council has every right to reduce a single line item if they so choose.
Okay, I thought we couldn't do that anymore, but if we can.
Am I
then-
wrong, Councillor
No,
Rossing?
you're absolutely
I believe that
correct,
still
'cause-
stands.
Yep, no, because
All right.
what we're ultimately approving is the budget with salary line items and expense line items for all the departments. And then they are allowed, as you see through all the transfers, to maneuver the money as they, again, it's the best work the mayor and the department heads do. It's you know, anybody that does a budget knows the minute you set the budget, the world changes. You know, you set your house budget, and 2 days later, the furnace blows. Well, you didn't have that in the budget. Well, guess what? You're not going on vacation, you're fixing your furnace, right? Well, it's no different here in the city, right? But it is. It's a $181 million budget. It's the biggest increase we've seen. That, you know, so we've got to pay for it. And so I think adjustments that we know that I can honestly tell you going into 2023, with all the open salary positions, the amount of monies that we're looking to adjust will be more than offset by the savings in all the positions that aren't being hired. And it's of no fault of the mayor, HR, or the department heads. Hiring people is hard right now. But I'm trying to relay upon or convey to the council, the money is there. All right? $1.1 million as of April 30th is not spent in salary line items. Right? It's not, well, you know, we wish we could hire them, but the mayor and departments are struggling just like businesses are struggling. It's tough to get people.
Councilor Brown. Thank you.
I just wanted to build upon what Councilor Wagner had mentioned, and also for clarification, so you can correct me if I'm wrong along the way. From my understanding, if we were to reduce the budget just from a single line item such as health insurance, and then money needs to be moved around or transferred or from what I'm understanding from what the mayor had said, is that if we do it that way, then the departments would be able to look at their line items and maybe make different reductions or modifications. What I just worry about is that not having the specific knowledge about each one of these line items that we might be doing a disservice to the departments by removing money from budgets that, or line items that they've, thought hard about and feel that they need the money there. But by doing that one general reduction from something like health insurance, that would still kind of put some of the power in the hands of the people who are most knowledgeable about their departments and their spending. So just based on what I was hearing from everybody, and specifically from what Councilor Wagner brought up, I feel like I would be comfortable making that broad reduction and then still putting that decision-making in the department heads' hands, that they can make those modifications for what suits their departments best for spending. So that's more of a comment on my behalf, but if there's anything that either didn't make sense or if I'm incorrect, I definitely invite you to correct me, please.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I got a couple of questions based upon the communications that's been going back and forth. Just to be clear on one point, the tax rate is based on the budget, so that if we reduce the budget size, then the tax rate gets adjusted, which is different than the other parts of this. So that is one way we, as the city council, controls the tax rate. I think it's actually important. Councilor Ossing put a lot of comments here on a couple of things. And some of the line item vetoes, I think, are appropriate to talk about at a higher level. To pick on the assessors yet again, okay? They're trying to hire up a bunch of staff, and they haven't been, it's been tough to hire people for that. But if we say for assessor salaries took out $50K, for sake of argument, that would leave the assessor's department the ability to figure out how they're going to spend the money that they have. And if they need to get more money, they can ask for a transfer and everything like that. But I think I'd rather see the cuts being listed similar to what Councilor Ossing has said, because there's specific points that we're trying to address that a lot of this stuff was brought up in the council already, as we're going through the items. So this is none of this is really new news. So I think this specifically addresses the concerns raised by this meeting by addressing each of these items in particular. Because if we took it from one item, if it was health insurance, then basically everything's being pulled from other places where there's free money to pay for health insurance. And we know we got that expense, and that's a pretty definite expense. So I don't like the idea of hitting something that we know is a proven expense because we're just trying to cut something. Philosophically, I'm kind of against that, because I'd rather see the cuts in the areas that we think that we've identified as saying, hey, there might be something that we need to address here. So I'm of the type to say, why don't we break it down itemized and then take the pieces off, and we can argue about how much we want to do it at the department level, but not necessarily from one chunk and then have it all skid around. I know the mayor will disagree with that, but that's just expressing my own opinion. So thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Just based off of what Councilor Doucette had just said, I just want better understanding for myself. So say it would happen if we were to reduce one line item such as the health insurance, and then now we've left, say, a $750,000 reduction from the original budget. When the departments go back and make any kind of modifications to put the money back into the health insurance fund, we would be reported out on that information through the reports that we get from Diane, so we would still be aware of where the money was being moved from to go back to the health insurance. So it's not, for me, I don't feel like it would be the information would disappear. It would still live and be reported. It would still live on and be reported out on. Correct?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, actually there would be a required transfer to come down to the council I need another $250,000 for health insurance, and here's the individual line items they are coming from. So the entire transfer would come back to the council for a transfer. But, you know, I guess that's your call. As far as everyone keeps bringing up the assessor, but one of the positions needs to be down there. So if cutting that clerk's position because you don't want to increase the position, then send up a request to amend and add that lower position back. As far as the consulting services, I mean, again, I'll be down here when I need to come down here if the individual line items are cut. It just makes it easier for the finance committee and the council, the department heads. And Councilor Ossing has been fighting for that approved budget in 2 line items for years. And he brings up the fact over and over, the reason we don't see that many transfers anymore. You see the transfers in that monthly report I give you every month. All the transfers are in there. But the reason they're not coming down here is because the department heads have the authority to do it within their budget. So, I mean, it's all there in front of you. It's all transparent. But as far as the medical insurance, there would have to be there's no other area to take it out in that department. The big transfer, if we're short there, would have to come down, and each line item where it came from would have to be presented to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Brown.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President.
So the mayor's absolutely correct. I mean, you know, if you take it out of the one item, the mayor, through the auditor, gives us every month, and that's one of the documents that I gave you this afternoon. I mean, you can yell at me, but bored with my time, I make sure all the transfers are done, and I pester the auditor every month if something doesn't look right. I mark up the sheet just so that, you know, what it is, everything gets where it's coming from, where it's going to. I match them all. I potentially drive the auditor a little nuts at times. But what the mayor said is correct. We give the department heads that flexibility. To Councilor Brown's point, if we take $1 million out of health insurance, all right, we know health insurance is going to cost that dollar figure, so money's got to come somewhere. So where does $1 million come from? Don't know right now, but I can tell you my guess of where I think money's not going to be spent during the year. The proof's going to come as the year goes on. Maybe we don't hire an assessor, or we don't fill all the police or fire department positions. You know, I don't know where we at. I can't tell you how many open positions there are. I mean, it's just hard to fill them, but there's money there, is what I'm trying to convey, that if anybody thinks making any of these adjustments impacts the way the city does business, it's just not right. I mean, we will be just fine. The question you gotta ask is, for the folks writing the check 4 times a year that are paying the taxes, you know, is it appropriate? Now, having a lot of money left up, we've got $11 million still in free cash that we haven't spent yet. We got a bunch of transfer requests in with the mayor for $11 million. So what happens on June 30th? Free cash dries up. So that means if none of those transfers come down and materialize, you start the process for fiscal year 23 with $11 million in free cash, plus whatever we don't spend here, plus whatever excess revenue we have, and so the process continues. But Councilor Farrow would always pound the table saying, free cash is your overtaxed the people. There is a shade of truth to that, but ultimately that's what it is. I mean, if we came out perfect, the budget revenues would come right in, meet the budget, there'd be zero free cash. But we know that's not the case, and having free cash is not a bad thing. It's really good. It allows, you know, the mayor and the council to do things. You know, you can go look at the list. But
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Landers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on finance, but I've done many budgets in the school department for years here. I guess my gut feeling is, Mr. Chairman, that it's worked the way we've been doing it. All right? I agree. Can you turn your
Mike.
It's working the way it's gone well. You know, we have the auditors' reports monthly. I think, we hire these department heads, and I think they do a good job running their department.
Absolutely do.
So I guess let them run their department, all right? And, something's working because the proof is in, we're not running around in May or June looking to cover deficits and that kind of crazy stuff. So I have no problem, whether this comes out in the floor to the full council, I don't mind, a decrease happening, and I think Councilor Austin did a good job going through picking up certain things, but I have no problem at all to let it come out of, say, health insurance, and let the department heads run the department, and in many respects, let the mayor run the city. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council Landers.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, Mr. Reed.
Just one point I want to make. First of all, President Austin keeps saying, the world's not going to come to an end. The city's not going to close if we cut X amount out. And I completely agree. And I said 10 years ago, you cut whatever you want and let me go do my job. And I'm not sitting here saying I can't live with the cuts. I hear that in schools all the time. I hear it in communities all the time. And I'm not here to say that. I'm just trying to make it easy on the department heads and the finance committee. But the only other thing, as far as the open positions go, unlike if I hire a DPW laborer down there, and it takes a little bit of time because I have to come down here for a transfer and everything else to get more money in there, police and fire take a long time to get on the streets. And I need the money in place for them to move forward. So those are two departments that they take too long to train. I think fire is about 6 months, Chief, and police is about a year. By the time we sign a letter of intent with them, they go to the academy and everything else because we have to find academies that are open. So, that's why a lot of it is in there, and it takes so long to get these people in place. So I just wanted to throw that out, Councilor. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Council Perlman.
Thank you. I just had a clarifying question as well. So I know when there is an opportunity that there's a transfer, right, it gets posted on a city council agenda, referred to a committee, and it's, available to the public. When we get the auditor's report and the internal transfers, is that information available publicly or no?
Good question, Council Perlman.
No, that's an internal.
That's an internal transfer.
So that's something I see as a differential, is the fact that, I know I'm not expecting everyone in the public to be reading all of our agendas, with a fine-tooth comb, but I do think it shows, right, a public record of what was going on if someone wanted to look back into it. And, the city's being, well-run and, the money is moving as it should. But I do think it is another stop point for people to say, okay, what's happening with the transfers? What's happening with the budget? And so it's just another checkpoint for public information. So I don't think it makes a difference either way, but it's just something that could be available publicly as well.
But it's public information, Councilor. So if the council wanted to put this up, when they get the report every month, put it up. I mean, it's public information. It's just that we don't mail it anywhere. The auditor sends it to us in the first couple days of the month, and it's for us to be on top of what the transfers and spending is. And it's actually one of the questions we're asked when we met with S&P each year. It's like, are you sharing monthly financial reports with the city council? They're the appropriating authority. So we do that, but if you want to put them up, put them up. They're public information. I don't think there's no proprietary information at all on them.
No.
Well, I'm definitely in favor of it being available if that's a change. I didn't know, if that's something that could move forward. I think that's just another opportunity for us to share information with the public. And, especially if, there's certain items and they're wondering why their tax bill is XYZ, they're able to see that information. So if that's a decision by the council or by the auditor's office directly, I think that would be a good practice moving forward.
Thank you. All right, well, I'll leave it to the committee members to make a decision. Like I said, going in, if you had a number in your head for a reduction or not, the idea would be to get this out of committee for the full council. That is up to the committee.
So I'm not, Mr. Chair, so I'm not on the committee, so this is where the committee members got to step up and make a decision. You guys are the ones that make the motions. I've given you my list of fun things to do. You guys can do it as the committee feels fit.
Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say that I don't think cutting health insurance would be good optics. I think there could be other places of the budget to cut if we're going to pick a point arbitrarily, but health insurance is something that just doesn't sound right. It's the city council that's cutting the health insurance budget for the city. So, but I'm not on the committee either, so it's your guys' call.
Mr. Chair, if I can help the council or the finance committee along, my recommendation, take my list, go through each line item. You guys, if you think it's a good item, motion to approve it. If you don't, move on to the next one. It's real simple, because whatever you don't take up in finance, I'm sure it'll appear again when it appears before the full council.
That is
But
correct.
if you think some of these items are worthwhile to adjust. And to just one step more on the mayor's point on excess levy capacity, if you reduce the budget, you're going to increase that excess levy capacity. We'll have more money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, so knowing that myself, Councilor Brown, and Councilor Irish are the only voting members here this evening, shall we move through each item? I feel like I maybe should let Councilor Brown not have to be the one to make the motion. Okay, so let's start with the first item.
So what's your motion?
So
going to
my
be?
motion would be to go line by line and do the recommended through Councilor Roby's suggestion of cutting each individual or within the department specifically, rather than doing it out of health insurance. So if there's a second for that
I will
motion.
second that,
All
Councilor
right.
Crum.
Do we need to vote on it, or we can just keep going with the items?
All in favor? It carries 3-0.
Okay, so the first item, 1410, the assessor, professional and tech services, a reduction of $50,000. I'm making a motion to approve that. Do I have a second?
Motion to,
To
Reduce?
accept the reduction of $50,000.
I will second that.
All right, so do we need to vote on each one?
Yes.
Do you want to call the vote, or do you want me to?
Motion
So,
has been made, seconded. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the assessors, was that reduced item 53180? All in favor? It carries 3-0.
okay, and then, just I guess for a clarity purpose, I know the mayor brought this up as well, if, for the next item, 1410, this would be requesting an amendment for the mayor to put back in the senior clerk that was eliminated, and then to remove the principal clerk position? Is that, so they're sort of together?
Mr. Chair.
I don't have that. I'm sorry.
Again, these are my recommendations. If the finance committee's not comfortable with them, you can go. As I stated the other night, creating a position that didn't get a whole lot of comfort as to why we needed it, I didn't think was valid. My bigger concern is we've got an individual in that position whose salary just isn't there. So if you eliminate the principal clerk position, you would need to ask the mayor to come back with an amended budget to fund the senior clerk position.
Okay, so that was my understanding as well, and yeah, I also wouldn't want that person to have to lose their position, and so I'm going to make, I guess, a dual motion of removing the principal clerk of the $51,300 and to request the mayor to make an amendment to add back in the senior clerk salary of $49,000. And do I have a second?
I will second that. Motion has been made to reduce the item 50520 and have the mayor resubmit for the position.
Mr. Chair, point of clarification, over here.
Oh, no, other.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to get clarification of this. I thought that the department head could actually do the transfer internal to the budget, so it doesn't necessarily have to come back to us.
I'm sorry, what's that, Council?
I thought that the assessor, the head of the budget of that department, can do a transfer from one position to the other, because that's within his authority, right? He can transfer within the department?
They can
Mr.
do
Chair,
internal transfers.
Yeah, but you don't want to do that.
Yeah, you can't create positions.
Yeah, the
It's
position got
creating a
eliminated,
position, yes.
Okay.
so it needs to
Okay.
be back into the budget, so.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so we had a second on that?
A second. All in favor? That carries 3-0.
Okay. And then the next motion would be to accept the reduction of the $5,500 from 50775 admin assistant. And the comment was around starting a position at a step 1 or 2. So, if there is an opportunity where this needs to be increased moving forward, then, we could come back down, but this would be a small reduction.
I will second that. Motion is made to reduce line item 50775 in the amount of $5,500. All in favor? Carries 3-0.
Okay, and then the next one around the property and building maintenance. Electricity has been a hot topic of the evening. 52120 is the line item, reduction of $100,000. And I'm excited to hear what happens with the energy consumption discussion in the future. And so I would move to make that reduction.
Motion has been made and seconded to reduce line item 52120 in the amount of $100,000. All in favor? Carries 3-0.
Thank you. Okay, and then moving forward in the other government, we have a reserve for salaries on line item 57820, a reduction of $200,000, and this is mostly due to the underrun in salary due to the vacant and retiring positions that we've seen. And I really hope that the hiring does pick up, and Marlborough is a great place to work, so I don't think there'll be any issues there. So I want to make the motion to accept that reduction.
I will second that. Motion has been made and seconded to reduce line item 57820 in the amount of $200,000. All in favor? Carries 3-0.
Okay, and then I know this is an item that was recommended by Council President Ossing regarding the overtime for the police department, specifically related to the courts, given that it hasn't been used historically and unlikely to ramp up in the future, and so it's an underrunning item, and so I would move to accept the reduction of $50,000 for the court overtime for the police department.
And that was like, okay. All right, so I will second that, but I will not.
For discussion?
I will second that for discussion. Motion's been made and seconded for discussion to reduce line item 51320, but I will not approve that.
Okay, and I don't know if there's any other discussion, and I know Councilor Ossing put this forward as well, but if there's any comments, but if it's, a transfer that could happen if needed in the future, and it's something that has been underfunded in the past, I don't see the same issue.
All in favor? All opposed? Does not carry.
Okay, the next item with the fire department, account number 51300, the gross overtime, again, a reduction of $50,000, and this is due to an underrunning in the salary line item, so I would move to accept that.
Motion, I will accept the motion has been made and seconded to reduce line item 51300, but I am not in favor of that, but to move to discussion. It has been seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Does not carry.
Okay. The next item, another electricity, 52120, under the maintenance of schools, and this is related to the energy conservation measures that are going to be moving forward, so I would move to accept the reduction of $100,000.
Motion has been made and seconded to reduce line item 52120 in the amount of $100,000. All in favor? Carries 3-0.
Okay, and then moving to the last item, 58595, labeled City Hall equipment, but really capital improvements that are related to the city. And this is a reduction of $300,000. Similar to Councilor Orem's comments, I want to say I don't want this to guarantee that it's going to come from ARPA until we've had that discussion, but I do think that there's another place for this money to be coming from. So I will move to accept the $300,000 reduction.
I will second that. Motion's been made and seconded to reduce line item 58595 in the amount of $300,000. All in favor? It carries 3-0. Now,
Were there any additional items that Chair Irish, you were looking to do?
Nope, I have made my comments in the two that I do not support, and I am absolutely fine going forward with this as a committee to move it forward for the rest of the council, so I'd like to report this out, to vote this out.
Again, Mr. Chair, you'd need a motion to now approve the budget with those reductions and a request to the mayor to amend the budget to put the senior clerk back in.
So moved. I can repeat the motion as well. So to approve the budget with the reductions that were stated, and then to request an amendment to the mayor to add back in the senior clerk position. Is there a second?
I will second that motion to approve as amended. Do we need a total figure? Because my figure's a little different right now. I have 180.
Clarification, while you're doing that, so if, to me, for what we just went through, the only things that weren't included, assuming that President Ossing's math was correct, there was two 50,000 ones that you didn't approve, so it's only being reduced by 100,000, which would bring the new figure to 803,300. So just, you had said, Chair Irish, your figure was 755,500, so I don't know if that was a math error.
No, that was my suggestion of what I saw after I looked at the budget, what I could see and be comfortable with for a reduction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, just, so, again, you're reducing the budget. You can't technically add the senior clerk money in, because the mayor has to come back. So the total of the reductions, I guess, I just want to confirm, is $806,800, if the math is right, and then the mayor would have to come back to amend the
Okay,
budget.
because you can't add back in the.
Oh, 806. No.
Well, you can't
That's the
technically
difference between the
reduce.
48 and the 51.
Yeah, because that's,
Well, no, because we can't add to it, so you've got to.
Just then clarification, so assuming, President Ossing, that your math was, I didn't go through and check your math, but you had a figure of 903,300, and the committee just approved everything except the 250,000 ones, which add up to 100,000, so wouldn't it be the 903,300 reduced by 100,000 is the final figure?
no, so, Council Wagner, so the senior clerk position that adds $49,000 in, that's not really a reduction, so you can't, that's got to come back before the council. The mayor has to come back with a supplemental budget, whether it's for Monday or 2 weeks later, to add that position back in. So the amount of reductions, again, if you got your pen, 50,000, 51,300, 5,500, 100,000, 200,000, 100,000, 300,000, that totals a reduction of what the mayor submitted for the budget of $806,800. We will eventually, assuming the transfer or the amended budget comes back, add in back 49,000, which now will get back to the chair's position of close to $750,000 reduction in the budget.
Yes.
Does that help, Council Wagner, or no?
There was an additional
Yes,
number that was added. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, but we have to wait for, as of tonight, right, before the budget amendment is added, because this is a work in progress, we can't add the money until after the mayor submits
The
it.
transfer.
Yep.
So you can subtract it, but you can't add it back. He's the only one that can add it back, right?
Yes.
My suggestion is going to, and again, I know President Ossing made a suggestion, report it out with the lower number as amended. And if I send down an amendment to the budget, you can accept it on the suspension the night you take up the budget and add it to the budget and approve the entire thing. So that would be the simplest way to do it. Madam Auditor? Yes? No? Thank you.
Thank you. So is that motion still on the table of that I put forward of the reduction of $806,800 and then the request to the mayor for the amended?
For the amendment budget.
Correct. So we
Yes.
would need a second.
I will second that. Motion was made and seconded to have it amended and have the mayor send down the amended budget in the reduction of $806,800. All in favor? Carries 3-0.
Okay. Is it now a motion to adjourn?
I will second that. Motion was made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? We are adjourned at 7:49 PM. Thank you.
Thank